Crime rates go down. Use of force goes up. We discover why you should simply own your mistakes and put your hands up rather than try to cover them up. 2 Metropolitan Police firearms officers on charges of wounding with intent. And COVID cops, not marshals, but COVID cops who will have the power to spy on you covertly to make sure you're behaving, coming soon to a town near you. And Consumer Care Group, which explains why face masks are a waste of time. This and more coming up. Thank you to all of those who have sent me links to stories. As for the rest of you, please remember to subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss any future uploads. And if you appreciate the work I do, please consider joining the channel Patreon for as little as just £3 per month, which will enable me to keep providing this content. Hello ladies, gentlemen, boys, girls, innies, outies and in-betweeners. My name is Dan and welcome back to another PAP Reports. It's Friday the 30th of October 2020. Figures released this week have shown that across 32 police forces in England and Wales, that although crime rates have fallen, the use of force by police has increased. Now this story will show you just how the police like to go hands-on for low-level offences or even non-offences, far more than they will with actual criminals, which to me is very telling. At the height of lockdown across the country, The Guardian reports a decrease of 19% in crime, although other statistics suggest it's higher. But the use of force against people has increased by 12.5%. Human rights group Liberty conducted an investigation which has shown that there were 163,749 recorded instances of use of force from April to June, compared with 145,543 from January to March. That's a difference of 18,206. That's 1,799 uses of force per day. Now, bear in mind that not all, in fact many, won't have been excessive force, but many will have been unjustified. Police, like the public, can legally use force to prevent injury to themselves or others, prevent crime and protect property, provided it's necessary, proportionate and reasonable. However, the public can only use force to prevent crime taking place or about to take place, whereas the police can also use force to arrest suspects for crimes that they have committed. The largest percentage of force was seen in, well, I'll give you 10 seconds to write which police force you think it was in the comments, and then we'll see if you're right. No cheating. Well, the answer was West Yorkshire Police. I'm sure to some of you that's no surprise. West Yorkshire Police used force on 11,290 occasions from April to June, compared with 7,582 times in January to March. That's a rise of 49%. And the biggest spike in number of incidents was seen in, well, I'll let you have a guess at that too, and let me know who you think it is in the comments. And if you think about what happened across the country over April to June, it shouldn't be too difficult to work out. The Metropolitan Police, who recorded the use of force 59,692 times from April to June, compared with 50,010 from January to March, a rise of 9,682 instances of use of force. That's 19%. Again, bear in mind that not all of these will have been excessive or necessarily unlawful uses of force. The spike in forceful tactics has left watchdog organisations troubled. Deborah Coles, director of the charity Inquest, which investigates state-related deaths, said these are alarming figures. Emergency powers have only exacerbated unfair, excessive and discriminatory policing, especially against racialised communities. We know all too well this can lead to death and serious injuries. Of the 13 forces which saw an increased use of force during lockdown and which provided Liberty investigators with ethnicity data by subject, 11 showed greater use of force against BAME people than was proportionate. Of the 13 forces which saw an increased use of force during lockdown and which provided Liberty investigators with ethnicity data by subject, 11 showed greater use of force against BAME people than was proportionate. In London, 38% of the Met's use of force from April to June was against black people, despite the fact this demographic makes up only 13% of the capital's population. Now, I have to say that this could well have been due to the BLM protests rather than the police simply being racist. And yes, I know that some people, including the police, are discriminatory towards black folk, but I still don't believe that this rise has anything to do with racism more than it has to do with many BLM protesters feeling they could get away with all sorts during the protests, including the white virtue signallers. In response to the findings by Liberty investigators, the Metropolitan Police said the rising use of force was down to an increase in proactive policing targeting known offenders. Regarding the disproportionate use of force on BAME people, a spokesperson said the possible reasons are complex. We work with partners on an ongoing basis to examine these concerns in greater depth. Greater Manchester Police told Liberty investigators that it is now undertaking a piece of work to examine its own use of force, including a review of data. The spokesman said this is being done to increase our transparency, which is particularly important following the death of George Floyd this year and the Black Lives Matter protest, because obviously Greater Manchester Police was involved in the death of George Floyd. The National Police Chiefs Council said the rise was due to greater proactive policing against known criminals. However, campaigners claim some police forces used the pandemic as an opportunity to selectively reassert an aggressive command and control style of policing. Dr. Michael Shiner, a policing expert from the London School of Economics, said the impact of COVID-19 has prompted lots of talk of a new normal, but the rise in police use of force follows a familiar pattern, bearing down heavily on communities that are already over-policed. The pandemic presented a unique opportunity for police to engage in genuine public service, but some forces seem to be using it as an opportunity to selectively reassert an aggressive command and control style policing. This will do nothing to engender trust and confidence. A National Police Chief Council spokesman said as many crime types went down during lockdown, it gave police breathing space to carry out beatings on the general public, to carry out proactive operations against known criminals. As police spent less time responding to new crimes, they could engage in apprehending offenders. Operations arising from proactive work would have undoubtedly seen force used, such as handcuffing and restraint tactics. Kent Council are bringing in more COVID marshals to police your behaviour in the streets. The latest edition of jackboots are to patrol Thanat's High Street and town centres, telling you to not stand so close to one another, tell you to wear your mask, and I've no doubt also believe they have some kind of power to lambast and chastise you in public if they feel you're not following the rules. Their role, like with other areas who have hired the waste of space COVID marshals, is said to include providing information, guidance and advice to the public in the hopes of restoring consumer confidence in the area. Well then, I do hope these COVID marshals have a degree in epidemiology or public health, otherwise their advice and guidance is useless and means nothing. Of course, COVID marshals will be identifiable by their high-vis vests, and it's never a good idea to give someone a high-vis vest as it gives them a perceived superiority over other people. It is important to note that COVID Stasi have zero powers, like none at all, over the powers than any member of the public have. And that means that they cannot issue fixed penalty notices, they cannot detain you, they cannot require your details. They have less powers than a parking enforcement or the litter police. And even the litter police have no powers to detain or require your details, which is why you should politely tell them to do one while jumping on the nearest bus or getting a taxi. And the reason to get on a bus or taxi, by the way, is because if you walk away, they'll just simply follow you. And if they see you get in your vehicle, they can use that to pass on to someone to investigate where you might live. So bus or taxi, go around the corner, get off, job's a good one. But anyway, back to the COVID Stasi. Councillor Rick Everett, leader of Thanet District Council, said, "We're pleased to be able to provide this additional support to our local businesses and residents. We know that people want to feel safe to go about their day-to-day lives and to feel supported as they navigate the various restrictions in place." Yeah, because regular members of the public who have been given a high-vis, who are simply regurgitating what they've been told in a half-hour lesson on propaganda, are really going to make a world of difference and make people feel so much safer, aren't they? Now, I would imagine that these COVID Stasi will have had zero education on the Equalities Act 2010, and I recommend that you do read it and put it to use if you feel that you've been discriminated against or humiliated by one of these COVID Stasis, and hold them personally and the council to account should you feel your rights have been breached. Now, I'm going to ask you to remember this particular story as there's a bit of a shocker coming up later in this video, so don't go nowhere. A Metropolitan Police officer has been handed his marching orders this week after a misconduct hearing yesterday. Detective Constable Dean Roberts, attached to the South Area Borough Command Unit, was found to have breached the standards of professional behaviour in respect of discreditable conduct, honesty and integrity, duties and responsibilities, and orders and instructions. It was alleged that between March and April 2019, DC Roberts used an unmarked police vehicle for his sole personal use whilst off duty without authority. It was further alleged that DC Roberts exceeded the national speed limit whilst using a vehicle and utilised the Metropolitan Police Service fuel card for petrol consumption whilst using a vehicle for his own purposes. In doing so, DC Roberts breached the standards of professional behaviour in respect of discreditable conduct, honesty and integrity, duties and responsibilities, and orders and instructions. Having considered all the evidence, the chair, Mr Christopher Mackay, and panel at the hearing found all matters were proven as gross misconduct, and DC Roberts was sent on his way, P45 in hand. This channel isn't about helping people to get out of trouble if they've done something wrong. It's about, hopefully, trying to educate in places on your rights and where the police may breach those rights. I believe that if you break the law, you should be man enough to hold your hands up and take the punishment. But I also believe that people should be treated fairly for the crimes that they commit. So this was quite a funny story to come across my path. 40-year-old Graham Nelson was caught out drink driving, which I have to say is one of the dumbest things you can possibly do anyway. When he was stopped by police, he was found to be more than twice the drink driving limit and was obviously reported for it. When Nelson attended court, the magistrate let him off, as he broke down in tears in the dock after telling the court at the time he was driving due to a medical emergency as his partner had cystic fibrosis, but then revealed that just days after he was arrested, his partner, 31-year-old Holly Carpenter, had died. A tragic situation for anyone to be in, I'm sure you'll agree. However, whilst the court clerk was reviewing images submitted as evidence, they spotted that the label on one of the prescriptions was dated after the date he had claimed she died. Further investigations were carried out and police found that her death had not been registered either, so police went to the home to ask some questions, knocked on the door and crapped themselves when the ghost of Holly Carpenter answered the door to them. Nelson was arrested again and this time admitted perjury at Durham Crown Court because she hadn't actually died. Holly said, "I was very angry when I found out he had said I had died. It was such a stupid thing to say. But it was out of worry for me. He knew that if he got sent to prison, I'd be on my own." And that worked out well for him, didn't it, Holly? Seeing as he's now got 6 months in jail and a driving ban of just over 2 years. Chances are he wouldn't have got jail in the first place and just a ban, but now the pleb has really stitched himself up. Married Avon and Somerset Police Constable Johnny Wall, who was accused of harassment after sending 80 texts and Instagram messages to a vulnerable woman, has denied the fact he was pursuing a relationship with her. A misconduct hearing heard how PC Wall, with 20 years police service, said he wanted to support her, so sent her messages on his work phone and then took the conversation onto Instagram so he didn't cut her off. He said he empathised with the woman who had just broken up with her partner and was allegedly threatening suicide. PC Wall sent messages complimenting her looks and personality, describing her ex-partner as punching above his weight, and said how easy it would be to find someone new. Yeah, that's just offering support, isn't it? It was said that Wall had signed off 3 of the messages with a kiss. However, his excuse for this was that it was habitual and a mistake. So he sent 80 texts and only 3 had a kiss, but he calls it a habitual mistake. Representing Avon and Somerset Police, Barrister Mark Leigh Morgan said PC Wall knew it was an absolute no-no for an officer to be communicating using his personal Instagram account through someone. Representing Avon and Somerset Police, Barrister Mark Leigh Morgan said PC Wall knew it's an absolute no-no for an officer to be communicating using his personal Instagram account with someone he met through the profession. The officer behaved in the way he did because he wanted to establish a sexual or inappropriate emotional relationship with the woman. He was told she was feeling suicidal. The breakup had had a devastating effect on her. Her reaction to the relationship coming to an end was extreme. He described her ex as punching above his weight. A member of the public reading these messages would wonder what's going on. Why is a police officer talking to her like this about how she's been treated? It discredits the police force. PC Wall said that moving the conversation onto Instagram was not my best idea, but I didn't want to cut her off and have no contact. He said he felt a bond with the woman because they had both served in the military and that he knew how she felt due to the end of his first marriage. Mr. Leigh Morgan said PC Wall had gone from telling the woman not to have any contact with her ex-partner to actually facilitating it. PC Wall had suggested that she write a letter to her ex-partner but not send it. At her request, PC Wall later called her ex-partner to ask if he would accept it, because the issue was not going to go away. Barrister Ramin Pakru said this was the definition of harassment. PC Wall told the hearing, with hindsight, I asked myself what I was thinking. At the time, I just had no alarm bells from this. This was an absolutely unique circumstance. I wasn't trying to strike up a sexual relationship with the woman. Never in 1,000 years did it come into my mind. That's one of the most disrespectful things you can do. I'm the happiest married man in the room. I would never jeopardise what I have now. Is what they all say when they get caught out. The hearing continues, and I'll update you as and when I can. On the 3rd of December 2018 on Haydons Road in Wimbledon, Brooklyn McFarlane was shot by firearms officers. Brooklyn was charged with conspiracy to commit robbery after he was shot due to a flying squad operation to foil an alleged robbery of an armoured cash van. The Independent Office for Police Conduct said at the time that 2 police officers fired their weapons during the sting operation on December the 4th, but both officers fired only once. A knife and a crowbar were recovered from the scene, and forensic searches were carried out to investigate how the police operation ended with gunshots. However, after the IOPC investigated the shooting, one officer identified as NX1 has now been charged with wounding with intent, and a second identified as MY55 has also been charged with attempted wounding with intent. The Crown Prosecution Service charged the 2 officers following a referral of evidence from the IOPC, which investigated the incident. The IOPC said it finished its investigation in November 2019 and notified the Crown Prosecution Service in January 2020 of possible charges. We examined the circumstances surrounding the shooting during a pre-planned operation in Haydons Road, Wimbledon, on the 3rd of December 2018, which resulted in a man being taken to hospital with injuries that were not life-threatening, they said. Both firearms officers will appear at Westminster Magistrates Court on the 25th of November. Now, remember I told you earlier to remember the story about the COVID marshals? Well, check this out for an absolute abuse of power. Councils have been and are hiring what's been called COVID cops, who will be issued with powers to spy on people at Christmas to ensure that they're being good little citizens. I kid you not, these traitors will be given body cams and so-called spying equipment to collect information on rule breakers and could also be in plain clothes. Enticing these social outcasts is a salary of up to £34,000 for their covert and overt activities. The covert cops will be given the power to investigate alleged breaches themselves, whereas COVID marshals can't do a damn thing. David Jamieson, the West Midlands Police and Crime Commissioner, said if we think there's large groups of people gathering where they shouldn't be, then police will have to intervene. If, again, there's flagrant breaking of the rules, then the police would have to enforce. Something I said the other day breaches our human rights, and something I sure as hell won't allow anyone to infringe on. In fact, human rights lawyers have now also come out and blasted the move as unlawful too. Madeleine Stone, Legal and Policy Officer at Big Brother Watch, said hiring undercover officers to enforce guidance that has no legal basis is heavy-handed. Council should focus their resources on supporting people affected by the crisis, not treating them like potential criminals. Spying on their residents is the worst possible approach local authorities could take and will only erode the public's trust in them. The advert calling for collaborators, jackboots, failed police, bullies, narcissists and busybodies reads, the threats posed by COVID-19 are rapidly changing, so the ability to learn new regulations, interpret guidance and provide an immediate public response is essential to this role. The role will offer advice and support to the public and business owners, respond to and investigate complaints regarding compliance with guidance and regulations, carry out spot checks and, where necessary, take appropriate enforcement action to ensure adherence with COVID-19 controls. These COVID cops will be tasked with executing routine or unplanned visits and inspections, covertly or overtly as required, to ensure compliance with current guidance and or legislation. Well, I can tell you this for nothing. If I find somebody snooping around my property trying to peer through windows or listen through letterboxes, or even if I see it happening at another address, I will make such a fuss they won't be able to hang around. Camera out, live stream on. I'll be knocking on doors and windows myself to make sure that people see these cretinous pieces of shit and make it impossible for them to do anything covertly, trying to impose on people's right to a private life. I urge you to do the same. If we allow covert operations against us like this, what's next? We cannot let this happen. We must look out for one another. Even if we don't like the person that they're spying on, we have a duty to ensure that this idea fails. Take your feelings out of it for the people that you don't like and target those feelings towards those who are taking these roles. These are the ones looking for that piece of chocolate and a pat on the head from the commissar, in the hope that they and their families are excused from punishment themselves. If you've ever seen Enemy at the Gates, then you might remember Sasha, a young Soviet boy who, although acts as a double agent, giving false information to the Germans, gets rewarded with chocolate. Until, of course, the Germans have no need for him anymore, and then string him up from a lamppost. Those of you taking one of these roles should remember that. A Coventry pub owner has taken it upon himself to discriminate against people with a disability by flat outright refusing people not wearing a mask entry to their establishment, even if they're exempt. The Horse and Jockey in Corley decided to ignore Equalities Act after they received a negative review online. The negative review, which gave the pub a 1-star rating on the pub's Facebook page, said the owner had humiliated her daughter, who she said has a hidden disability, for not wearing a mask. The post read, "This pub and specifically its owner should be ashamed of themselves. Hate speech against people with hidden disabilities is illegal, and yesterday the owner of this pub humiliated my daughter in front of all customers for not wearing a face mask. What absolutely disgusting behaviour, showing a complete lack of intelligence." The pub owner, who gave his name as Steve, said, "We asked the lady in question to put a face mask on to walk to her table, and she refused to wear it. I am not prepared to put my staff at risk." When asked if that included people who are exempt from wearing a mask, Steve said, if you have not got a mask or cannot wear a mask, you should not come in. It's on a big sign outside as well. Well, sorry, Steve, but a sign nor company policy trumps people's rights. By all means, you could refuse entry to people for practically any reason, but you cannot discriminate against people for disabilities, even if those disabilities are not obvious ones. Even though the government says that face masks don't need to be worn by those with certain disabilities, the fear-mongering has really gotten to some people and has made them act in this manner. I mean, let's face it, if these people really thought the virus was that bad, would they open at all? The pub's reply to the negative review made by someone at the pub, presumably Steve, said, "It's simple. No mask, no entry, no excuse. Protecting staff and customers is more important to us. Ignorant people not wearing masks and saying they're exempt should not be going into busy establishments." And as I just said, if the virus was as bad as these people think and they were using their brains, then they'd not open at all. After all, it's not just visitors to the pub without a mask who can spread a virus. One of the customers with a mask may have been to a local shop. Their coat may have rubbed on a surface that someone's just coughed on or touched with infected hands. They then enter the pub and put their coat on the back of their chair, transferring a virus to the chair. Someone comes past and touches the chair. They then touch a table, and so on. So if you and others were really that concerned, then you'd stay shut. People wouldn't be allowed to remove their masks for any reason. So your argument is flawed, Stevie boy. The comments have apparently now been deleted, but one person replied, "What with someone with a hidden disability? Absolutely shocking and disgusting behaviour, discrimination at its finest." Now, under the Equalities Act 2010, there are several sections which would apply here, but I'll stick with the two that I think are most relevant. Section 29(5)(a) and Section 13(1), both of which are on the reverse of the face mask exempt cards which I've had made. Equality Act 2010, Section 29(5)(a), provision of services. A service provider must not, in providing the service, victimise a person as to the terms on which they provide the service. Equality Act 2010, Section 13(1), direct discrimination. A person discriminates against another if, because of a protected characteristic, they treat that person less favourably than they would treat others. And let's not forget the Universal Declaration on Bioethics and Human Rights, Article 6, which reads, Any preventative, diagnostic and therapeutic medical intervention is only to be carried out with the prior, free and informed consent of the person concerned. The consent should, where appropriate, be express and may be withdrawn by the person concerned at any time and for any reason without disadvantage or prejudice. So remember, folks, if you have a hidden disability and you are discriminated against, I would genuinely suggest everyone start taking these companies, businesses and individuals to civil court. I say that rather than calling the police because, as we all know, the plod are useless and it will require we the people to take matters into our own hands to sort this out. And while we're on the subject, let's take a look at an article published today in Sky News about face masks. Maybe this will stop idiots who think infringing our rights is a clever thing to do. Are you listening, Stevie? The consumer website Which has carried out tests into the effectiveness of different types of face masks. These tests indicated that the very worst type of face mask allowed 93% of what they call potentially harmful bacteria to penetrate them. Now, I need to make it clear here that this article uses the term bacteria and potentially harmful. They have not used the word virus, COVID or coronavirus, something I fear many people would not notice. And before any snowflakes start with a, well, if it will stop bacteria, it will stop viruses, WebMD explained this. Viruses are tinier than bacteria. In fact, the largest virus is smaller than the smallest bacteria. Which is now urging manufacturers and retailers to up their game after 3 of the 15 face coverings it tested were branded as a don't buy. At the bottom of the table was the Termin 8 lightweight breathable face covering sold by Lloyd's Pharmacy for £2, as does White Pattern face mask that sells for £3 and an Etiquette face covering that was available at Superdrug for £3. 2 products were awarded Best Buy status. The first was the Necky reusable face mask available in Boots and Ocado with bundles of 3 sold for £15. Face coverings made by Bags of Ethics, great British designer, also costing £15 for 3 and sold by ASOS and John Lewis, also passed the Which tests with flying colours. Both earned a full 5-star for being breathable and earned 4 out of 5 stars when it came to filtration, although it fails to explain why it only received 4 out of 5 for filtration. The research revealed that masks with multiple layers are more effective than single layer masks, but Which said there is a clear trade-off between breathability and how effective they are at filtration. Fabric masks that scored 5 out of 5 for filtration were also those that scored the lowest for breathability. Bearing in mind this is filtration on bacteria, not viruses. But it's also interesting to hear that they're saying that masks can affect somebody's breathing. Very interesting. If a face covering is not breathable, it can get damp more quickly with condensation from trapped breath and might encourage people to adjust or remove their mask, especially if they're wearing glasses. While reusable fabric face coverings are not designed to block ultrafine particles such as COVID-19 like a medical mask would, they are intended to help block larger droplets and aerosols breathed out by the wearer who may be infected but asymptomatic. So in other words, reusable masks are definitely going to struggle blocking any COVID particles. Another interesting revelation from the consumer protection giant Which. So next time those of you who think masks are going to protect you, I would suggest that you think again. I know some of the subscribers won't like this part of the report, but I can and always will be honest in my own views, but I do respect others. Many people out there need to simply stop accepting what they're being told as gospel. People need to research for themselves, and just because someone has a position as a medical expert or government medical advisor means nothing. John Bodkin Adams and Harold Shipman were medical professionals. And look how that turned out for what's believed to have been more than 610 victims between them. So please, when you see someone without a mask, leave them be. You could be just as much a danger to them as you think they are to you. A prison officer working at Wetherby Young Offenders Institute in West Yorkshire appeared before Leeds Crown Court this week and pleaded guilty to one offence of misconduct in public office. 25-year-old Jordan Traynor engaged in sexual touching of a teenager and was involved in improper relationships with 2 inmates. She also admitted to sending sexual images of herself to teenagers. She admitted to bringing in packages for inmates and failing to report that they were in possession of mobile phones. All of the incidents are said to have happened on or before December the 23rd, 2019. Details of the charge involves misconduct, including developing improper relationships with 2 inmates aged under 18 and passing messages between the pair. The offence also involves failing to report that each of these 2 inmates were in unauthorised possession of mobile phones. The offence also involves bringing 4 packages into the institution and delivering them to one of the inmates. On approximately 3 occasions, she engaged in sexual touching with one of the inmates. A barrister, Jade Edwards, said a psychiatric report had been ordered and asked for the sentencing to be adjourned for 4 weeks. The judge said, "You have pleaded guilty to what I am sure you understand is a very serious offence. It is a breach of trust and it is a very serious matter. I'm going to order a pre-sentence report so the judge who sentences you has a full understanding of your background and any difficulties you may face. You must understand that a custodial sentence is almost inevitable in a case such as this. There is no point in giving you false hope." Well, it's a shame she's not a copper. She'd have been sent on her way with a suspended sentence by now. Huge thank you to channel supporters, one and all, especially the channel Patreon supporters. Your support is genuinely appreciated. And that is all I have for you today and this week. Please like, share, comment and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts, as I know many of you will. And until next time, stay safe, look after each other. From the police, other officials, and from the team and myself, have a great weekend. Good night, all. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you like the content and you'd like to help support the channel, you can do so. In the description of every video, there are some links to ways that you're able to help support the channel so I can continue putting out content. If you're unable to help us in that way, hit that subscribe button up the top there. If you haven't already, become a subscriber. That is support enough. Share the videos, comment, like, it all helps. If you're looking for something else to watch, up top there is my latest video. Down the bottom there is a video that YouTube recommends for you.